Hello. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, everyone. Yeah? Are we ready? Yeah. Hi. Hello. Yeah. Hi. So I think we are ready to start the session. If no. Okay, so we are ready. Yeah? Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a very nice lunch and a very nice break after this morning session. We are going to start now with the third session, which will be on arbitrary detention, torture and ill treatment, unforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings. My name is Magda El Haytem. I'm a French lawyer. I'm based in Paris, and I'm here on behalf of the International Association for Lawyers, Institute for the Rule of Law, which in French is the UIA, for those who know it. And for this session, I would like to invite the four speakers to come to the stage, please. Hello. Are you comfortable? Hello, ladies. I'm very happy that we have a female panel. And I should say that for this panel, it's going to be a bit different because it's going to be more personal, I think, because you are all very strong activists and human rights defenders, and you're going to share a lot on your personal cases and histories. So thank you very much for doing us the honor of coming here and give you some of your time. And I think on this note, we are going to start with the first one. And I would like to welcome Ms. Edita Burgos. She is a human rights defender's former journalist during the martial law period, and along with her husband, Jose Burgos. Is it the right pronunciation? Yeah. They were defending land rights, and along with their son, who is now disappeared for 17 years, if I'm right. So I would like to give you the floor to explain your experience and the role maybe of the lawyers in your family case. So please, thank you. And I think we have presentation for the, yeah.
Yes. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay. I thought you were already sleeping. That was a good lunch. I didn't know what to talk about when I was invited. And I knew I was going to have experts, more experienced human rights defenders, and a bigger human rights community that I will talk to. So I told myself, what do I say to these people who are experts? However, I accepted the invitation because on behalf of my fellow victims, human rights defenders and communities, I would like to thank the International Fair Trial Day organizers for this opportunity to be a part of the conference, not only to share insights, which I think you already know, but to also express our deep gratitude and profound appreciation for the lawyers' work in international solidarity for people's rights in the Philippines. So bear with me. For Zion's sake, I shall not be silent. For the sake of Jerusalem, I will not be still until her justice comes forth as brightness and her salvation is lit up like a torch. That's Isaiah. This verse captures the disposition of most of the relatives of victims of human rights violations. I have stood side by side with them in the battlefield, and I saw how they would not give up. One wonders where the courage which feeds this self-importance comes from, considering that victims, fallen and bruised, still fight back. As for me, to borrow the words of Nikos Kazantzakis, a Greek philosopher, the only thing I know is this: I am full of wounds and still standing on my feet. Why wounds? Consider my son Jonas was abducted 7 years ago. He is still missing. But it is not only the desaparecidos or enforced disappearances that plague the country. I will not explain them. They have been discussed a lot by previous speakers. Extrajudicial killings, summary executions of non-combatants, displacement of civilians due to bombing, suppression of civil liberties, shrinking of the democratic space, plight of political prisoners, faith-based NGOs charged with terrorism financing and freezing their funds, and of course, enforced disappearances. I will not give you figures. I will not give you numbers because they were already mentioned. You can visit the website of Karapatan because all the figures that I have come from this source. Karapatan, an organization, a coalition of more than 40 organizations. Now, looking at the violations, we look now at the laws. Now, I will not also explain this because you know better than I what these are all about. You are the experts. We have the Anti-Enforced or Involuntary Disappearance Law, 2012. We have Anti-Torture Law, or better known as Republic Act 9745. We have the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020, of RA 1147, and the Anti-Money Laundering Law, AMLC, which which is now being implemented by the MLAC, RA 9160. But when we victims, families of victims, look at this, these are all meaningless. We always look at it vis-a-vis what we're experiencing. Now, what are our experiences? The writ of habeas corpus and the writ of amparo are inutile, useless, unless the institutions cooperate. In the case of my son, we were granted partial writ of amparo, and we were authorized to look for the documents that had to do with his abduction. Did the Philippine Army comply? No. But they were not cited in contempt. We still have a pending case filed with the Supreme Court 7 years ago to cite in contempt those who did not comply. And the funny part, if it's not a sad thing, is that the perpetrators whom we were able to identify in open court were instead of being punished, they were promoted. In fact, one of them is now the national advisor of the president on, of course, I will not name names because I will be the next one abducted. They are either promoted in spite of our opposition at the Senate, they are given scholarships, and they're even given trips abroad. The team that abducted Jonas, whom we were able to identify, but whom the witnesses would not like to identify because they're afraid, were given trips abroad, probably as reward. The secret detention centers and tortures still exist, although we have the anti-terror law. Later on, the next speakers will describe how they were brought to secret detention centers. 3 years after the abduction of Jonas, a retired soldier came to my house to tell me, "Ma'am, I cannot live with my conscience. I have to tell you I was one of the torturers of your son." And he was placed in a safe place, their safe place, in a camp that is the neighbor of the farm where I live now. But he would not give an official statement, so I could use it and bring this case to court. Useless, because I went to all the institutions, all the officers, and all the military and civilian officers who had to do with following the law, making sure that the law is followed. And wherever I went, I was received openly by the head, the CIDG, PNP, the AFP. They said, yes, yes, ma'am, we will help you. Your husband contributed so much to the country. We will help you. Two-faced. But when you leave, they cover up and protect the institution. And now, after 17 years, I know better. I know better when I saw hypocrisy to the face, and that is happening right now. By not acting on violations that happened in the past administration, this administration is just as guilty. Even if the courts rule in our favor, we win the battle, but we lose the war. Take the case of Karen and Shirley, the two UP students. The perpetrators are now in jail, a general and two other Philippine Army officers. But the parents of Karen and Shirley do not know where they are. They don't know the fate of the two. We only hear stories about someone being pregnant, about someone passing the house of a relative and all that. But we are nowhere. And not only that, justice has not been served. Not only that we do not know the truth, but we know that these three persons are behind bars and they are serving a life sentence. And we also know from reliable sources that the general is living in a separate quarter in an air-conditioned room, more comfortable than all of us while we are paying the bills of his air conditioning. This is supposed to be counted as a victory because the perpetrators were made to account. But they just simply denied that they don't know anything about Karen and Sherlyn. So hindi pa rin mahanap. So we can still find them. We don't know. The mother now is both, I think yes, one mother is sick. And her only wish is to know the truth about what happened to her daughter. In the third world country, next slide please. In the third world country, the impact of human rights violations aggravates the pitiful conditions of the poor, the marginalized who compose a majority of the victims. I think somebody mentioned the data that most of the victims come from, about 85% of the victims come from poor families and the marginalized. Financial impact is the most observable when the taken are breadwinners. In a very short analysis which I made of the 14, by the way, there are already 14 disappeared victims under this rule of Marcos Jr. Out of the 14, 64% were the main breadwinners, while 14% contributed to the family's income. In other words, 78% of these families are now suffering from economic deprivation. And to think that the search alone, with its added costs, burdens the already distressed family. The degradation of the family's economic situation affects communities directly through their social marginalization. Loss of human resource in livelihood, agriculture rights, health, education, and others is something that is gravely felt by the communities. Those who help them are the ones taken. Only when I tried to look for my son in the mountainous area of North Sagaray and Bulacan, did I learn that my son, Jonas, helped build a water system for an isolated village. And they said, we really miss him because he would tutor our children, teach them how to read. That is the kind of victim whose loss is truly felt by the community. We also lose good potential leaders. Why don't we have anyone to choose from among those who were candidates for the last elections? Because the young students were taken when they were young. These were the young student leaders. They could have been very good national leaders because they were not only devoted or committed, they were willing to risk their lives for the poor and the country. Development of unhealthy wariness and distrust of people in uniform and those in authority, especially among children who understandably look at uniformed men as the villains, is something that we should be concerned about. What kind of next generation will we have if they don't have any respect for authority? So I tried to ask the grandchild of a labor leader who was abducted, and I said, why do you join the rallies? You're just 7 years old. Why do you go with your grandma? Do you understand what you're fighting for? No, ma'am. What I want to understand is why adults are allowed to be unjust. Why are they allowed to imprison people, and yet we young ones, when we do something wrong, we get whipped, we get scolded. Even children are affected by impunity. And that is a very dangerous thing in values development. The left behind, formerly dynamic residents, retrogressed into passive citizens for fear of being labeled, afraid that they will suffer the same fate. Some of them actually approached me, why are you very vocal? Next time they might, they may target you. Seems like a very sad picture, very frustrating picture for us, but we have sources of hope. So to us victims, the need to turn to reliable upwelling of hope and strength is imperative. This is my personal experience. I needed to look for something that would push me to continue what I'm doing, to look for my son. Aside from family, among these groups, we find the most impactful and prominent of which are the people's lawyers. I did not understand what the writ of habeas corpus meant. Of course, I finished education, but these terms like habeas corpus, what is amparo, what is this and that, these are the lawyers that explain this to us. And that helped. They say that the lawyers have to be brave because their clients are brave. I say we victims and families need to be brave because the lawyers are brave, risking even their lives. We can do no less. In the 17 years of scuffling with opponents, with the opposition, I saw how the lawyers who helped us were committed. Even when we were not able to come to court, they would be there. Not only do they defend our rights, they do these things for free. And for us who belong to the margins, that means a lot. I want to borrow the words of Oscar Wilde, "A flower blooms for its own joy." That's how our lawyers are here. The lawyers that I know, they are our lawyers. They do what is right because it is right. From there, we are able to draw our sources of hope. But this spring is also under attack. Since 2016, more than 50 lawyers have been killed. I'm glad I'm not a lawyer. For exercising their professional duties. I have grandchildren to take care of, 10 of them. Earning the notorious repute that the Philippines is one of the more dangerous places in the world for human rights lawyers. Now, what do I draw from this? I only have 10 minutes. So if you have questions, we have a lot of cases which we can bring to your attention to prove what I've been saying. It is not our weaknesses, but our strengths that endanger us for lawyers and human rights defenders. Why did one soldier ask me, "Your son deserved to be abducted"? Why did he become an activist? Actually, what he said was communist. I just edited that. I don't want, because he labeled my son. I didn't want to use his label. And I said, I know why you're mad at him, because he could do something that you could not do. Something that you're supposed to do to defend people's rights, but you didn't do it. So he did it. That's why you're mad at my son. He got so mad, he stomped his feet and he went away. The brutality of the humanization of human rights violations have not downgraded most of us, at least the people I work with, to self-censorship or self-suppression. By refusing to be silent, I believe that I also snub the victory of the opposition. We have been given hope that rises in the midst of disappointments. This kind of hope is not found in the avoidance of suffering, but the working through it, because suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. I will not deny I cried 100 nights missing my son. Why should I say I'm not afraid? Why should I say I am not sad? But you work through it and say, I am sad, but I will still look for him. We should not accept as normal the human rights violations in whatever way we can, in whatever way we can disagree. I am only one, you are also one, but 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, we can do something to change everything. Now, what do I recommend? Will it matter what I recommend? These are the experts. But let me say this. One meaningful step to address this is for international pressure, such as holding this kind of conference, International Fair Trial Day, and letting the world know that this is happening in the Philippines. But more than that, we will let the government in the Philippines know that the world is watching. Conversion of relevant people in uniform could be the key. Through orientations, seminars, workshops, conferences, whatever, we hope to make the blurred lines clearer. What is right between what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad, what is ordered, is it just, is it right, is it moral? In other words, to focus on working towards the higher moral dimension of all victims. The first time I visited the United Nations, thanks to Kurapatan, I was with Marie then. I was invited to speak in a side event where the consul, a very pretty lady, Philippine consul, was there, and she was saying, of course he was abducted because he's a communist, he's not a Christian. So how would I contest that? Then I was asked to speak, so I spoke. I said, you know, ma'am, you know, sirs, my son Jonas was only 4. He would get his food on the table, bring his pork chop to the neighbor, and give his food there at lunchtime. I would not stop him because I was wondering what he would be doing. He brought his food to the neighbor. He would come back with rice, black rice. And I said, what did you do? My neighbor, my friend there, he's my playmate, he never tasted pork chop yet when I told him we had pork chop for lunch. So I haven't tasted his food also, black soup, which is actually soy sauce poured on rice. He started that way. Every time his father would come home, well, not every time, occasionally his father would come home and his father would blow his stuff, where are my slippers? And it is Jonas who would say, I gave it away. Why did you give it away? Because the guy selling taho, the street vendor, was wearing slippers with holes this big, so I gave your slippers away. My husband could not get mad at my son. When he graduated with honors, agriculture, he became the farm manager. Every time he would come home, he said, I help harvest eggplants in the neighborhood. So where are the eggplants? He would bring 4 or 5 pieces. Where are the others? Is this the pay that you get? I said, when I was walking, they were asking for some, so I kept giving until only 4 were left for us, for the family. Here, his grandmother worked in the States, in New York, for some time. And she would always send him signature shirts. Because he was the most, charismatic, he would always kiss his grandmother, so his grandmother always remembered him. Every time he goes out, he'd wear good shirts. When he comes back, he's bare, naked. Then I said, where's your shirt? A farmer needed it more. He was working without shirt. So that was what I told the panel. Then I said, ma'am, tell me, are you more Christian than my son? Have you ever given away your food to a neighbor? Have you ever given the shirt on your back to somebody else? Now you tell me, who deserves to be abducted? Then she was walking outside, and I heard her mumbling to my friend. I said, what did she say? She said, it's so difficult to debate with Mrs. Burgos. That's how it is. Occupy a higher moral ground. Because we are doing what we need to do, because it is right. And we do not allow them to shame us. Be a helix of good in our journey, curling around, consistently steadily penetrating without breaking. Do you know how a corkscrew works? When you open wine, I'm sure all of you have already had wine. So you twist it around, right? That's a helix. That's how we work around victims, around perpetrators, upon the military, implanting a force unseen but grasping around both victims and oppressors, leading them to our ways of truth and justice. One example. I still have time? Yeah, okay. She hasn't looked at the watch. Okay. Anyway, right after Jonas was taken, I was being monitored. I was being surveilled. Having had the experience in martial law of being surveilled, because I was general manager of our publication, the opposition paper, I already knew how to be careful. So I took note of the car plate, took note of the car color, and all that. One day, because every day I would go to the house of prayer. I volunteered there for free. And the car was not around. The car was not following me. But lo and behold, it was already in front of the house of prayer. So he went ahead. But there was this handsome boy seated beside the gate. I suspected he was the one following me. So instead of entering, because Jonas was abducted in April, and this happened in May, it was, the height of summer. So I said, good morning, anak. Anak means son. Good morning, son. It's so hot here. Would you like to enter our house of prayer? He was just staring at me. He was handsome, tall, with a bag which was bulging. You know what was inside the bag. And the car was parked in front of the house of prayer. He didn't answer, but I said, son, you will wait for me under the heat of the sun. It's so hot. If you come in, it's better there. We have a chapel and there's a garden. You can stay in the garden if you don't want to go to the chapel. And when I go, I'll tell you so that you can follow me again. You know what? He just looked at me. He bowed down and he left. I thought that was the end of it. 4 years after, in Baguio, I was a speaker at the University of the Philippines in Baguio. Here is this uniformed man. I didn't recognize him. He approached me. Ma'am, do you remember me? Do I know you? Ma'am, I was the man who was seated beside the gate. I was the one following you. Oh. So why are you introducing yourself to me? Because what you did made me think if what I was doing was right or wrong. That is the corkscrew. You go into the heart and leave something there. When the parents of Balyaga is our suspected head of the team who took Jonas because he was identified in open court, his parents testified at the Court of Appeals and said that it could not have been him because he was present at the family reunion. Of course, they were not able to produce any evidence like pictures. I requested, sayang, I wish Agabin were here because he was the one with us then. I asked permission from the court if I could speak to the parents, and I approached them. We were in a corner, and I told them, Sir, Ma'am, I understand that you want to defend your son. You don't want your son to go to jail because he has a family. But I also have a son. I'm only looking for him. Please tell him I will not send him to jail. I will not pursue this if he only tells me where I can find Jonas. I was pleading in court, but they could not hear us. They were all in the other side. You know what happened? The parents started to cry, and they were really sobbing. Until finally my daughter approached me and said, Mommy, what are you doing? Come on, why did you make them cry? So I knew that they were lying. And I could have pursued it. But I said, Mom, I will not pursue this. But convince your son. Tell him that I am only looking for my son. I do not want any harm to come to him. End of story. Several years after, one of these pastors of NCCP told me, you know what? The parents of this guy, Major Balyaga, are my parishioners, the Protestants. Oh, and they told me that they pray for you and your son.
Thank you very much.
So it stayed in that. I have several, I can make a book out of these instances, but I only have 10 minutes. So,
I'm sorry.
so what is
I'm
my
sorry,
reflection? Driven to face both the strongest and the weakest, the loudest and the voiceless, we find that when we falter, as Simon of Cyrene and Veronica are sent our way from the people's lawyers. We victims are forever grateful for this. Now let me end with a quote before our tears fall. Don't allow the sad sight of human injustice to sadden your soul. Someday, you will see the unfailing justice of God triumph over it. And for me, If I only see conversions among people in uniform, I would have triumphed in my search for Jonas. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very strong statement. A bit long, I have to say, but I'm sorry, I should have said something before. But we're gonna be interested now in Jonila Castro and Jed Tamano, who are two very young, I have to say, environmental activists. And I'm very happy that we have the chance to share your story in front of such a young public as well, because at a university, it's always important as well to share those kind of stories. So please have the floor. Would you want to stay here? Yeah?
So good afternoon to everyone. So today, Janila and I will just discuss our case to highlight and illustrate the conditions of the continuous and systematic perpetuation of arbitrary detention and enforced disappearances here in the Philippines. So to give a bit of a background, Janila and I, just like many other activists here, we were in a province in Central Luzon to investigate a situation and to organize the communities that are being threatened, communities that have their rights to livelihood, homes, and a clean environment threatened by destructive projects. So one day when we were supposed to travel to another coastal community where we usually hold community consultations, interviews, and overall investigation of the situation and place. We were abducted by masked men. We were not presented a warrant of arrest, or they did not introduce themselves as officers of the state. They forcibly took us from the streets and put us into a vehicle. They blindfolded us, tied our hands, and covered our mouths. They took our belongings, including our cell phones. We were arbitrarily detained for 17 days. We were brought to 2 secret detention facilities and a military camp. The secret detention facilities resembled a motel and a studio-type house. In these secret detention facilities, or they call safe house, this is where they started to interrogate us, to ask us who are the members of our organization, where are the communities that we've been going to, and they would constantly link our organization, Akap Ka Manila Bay, to a terrorist group. Aside from the interrogation, they also put us into psychological torture. Although they did not physically torture us, they would create conditions to make us think that we will be tortured later, or if we don't cooperate. They would use different tactics like good cop and bad cop tactics, blindfolded or not. There would be a few men who would act nice. They would say that they're just concerned about us and that we should just cooperate, or their bosses who are scarier and meaner will come and deal with us much harsher. They also consistently threatened us with putting us in the same grave. They would also threaten us to slap. They would threaten to slap us with rebellion cases. But aside from that, they would also act nice and say that they just pity us, so that's why they're not sexually assaulting us. And the worst part was when they would try to use emotional blackmail on both of us by saying that Junila cooperated, Jed cooperated already, so you should already speak. And it would just continue for many hours, days. So yeah, when we were separated in the second safe house, we ourselves just found a way to survive by acting like we were surrendering. We had to act like we were cooperating with them, but still try to misdirect the information that they wanted to get from us. And that's where the affidavit comes in, that after we convinced them of our sincereness that we were gonna surrender, they offered us that they would offer us they would offer us a condition to leave and to be free if only we would sign a statement that we would craft a statement that includes the narrative that they want from us, by saying that we're surrendering, that we were not abducted, and we're actually members of a terrorist group. So before they transferred us to the military camp, they made us rewrite many times a statement that indicated our voluntary surrenderings. So Junila will continue.
So, of course, we are sure that the state forces are involved with the abduction. Prior to that, prior to the abduction, on my part, the military, the elements of the military and the NTF-LCAC were visiting my parents' house. These agents were telling to my parents that, do you know that your daughter is a member of the New People's Army? You should help us to make her surrender. They kept on doing that to my parents, harassing them, following them to their workplace and to our house. So from that incident, they are the ones who have the intention and motive to make us surrender. Then when we were inside the secret detention facilities, when we managed to get their trust, so there were times that I asked them, why did you become a soldier? Then they will, and by that way, I realized they confirmed that they are members of the military, particularly working on the intelligence work. Well, some of them corrected me, no, I am from the NTF-LCAC. No, I am from the police. So that way, I confirmed that they are state forces. Aside from that, during the interrogation, on the document, I saw a logo referring to a military battalion in the Philippines. Then, yeah, as Jed said, we were transferred to the military camp. So what I was trying to say is, it is a connivance of different government agencies. Then when we were inside the military camp, so we were presented again to different government agencies. Then this one person from the NTF-LCAC is the one urging and forcing us to be presented in a press conference to again narrate what was written on the coerced statement written in the secret detention facility. At first, we strongly disagreed with that, but later on, we realized that that press con, at those 17 days, that press con will be the only day that we can freely tell the truth, that people will hear us and believe us. So we grabbed that opportunity. So the reason why we decided to tell the truth on that press con, even though we anticipated that at least that telling the truth might make us be put on jail or worse, get killed. But what we realized at the time is this pattern of abduction, then an activist being missing, then later on being presented on a press conference as a fake and forced surrender. It has been happening a lot of times. And someone, and the truth about that must be told. And that is more important in order to at least to expose the truth that is happening. We realize that we have to do this, not just for ourselves, but for all of the missing activists until now. They can tell their stories because they are still missing. They can tell their stories because they are still being held by the military. So why would we not use our voice at that time? And so later on, because of the thanks really to the mass movement that calls on the release, to the surface and release, calling for the surface and release of us, the military and the NTF-LCAC were pressured to release us. But after that, of course, several government officials sided with the narrative of the military and the NTF-LCAC. Some of them said that what we did is just part of the communist playbook, that it's just a play or it is planned, that we were liars. But so obviously the connivance of different government agencies is still continuing. Then for our protection, we filed a writ of amparo and habeas data. Then yes, it was granted, but the hearings are done, so we are still waiting for the full grant of the privileges. But we believe that it was prolonged by the military, and the NTF-LCAC had 19 witnesses to prolong the hearings for our writ of amparo and habeas data. And aside from that, even before the grant of the Supreme Court for our writs, the military filed a case against us. It was perjury at first, then it was replaced with grave oral defamation. So they continued to stand with their narrative that we are lying during the press conference. It is still pending at the moment. So what I'm trying to say is the law is being used to threaten us to not speak on the truth. It is also being used to harass us. But even though, and aside from that, if you are a victim of state forces, it is hard to seek justice because you are the one who has the burden of proving that you are a victim, even though every day, actually, you are battling with all the traumas of what happened to you. But during court hearings, you are the ones carrying that burden. We even had to prove our credibility, that we are not unarmed, that we are just activists and civilians, not focusing on what the military and the NTF-LCAC did to us. So when people says that the Marcos administration is better than the Duterte administration, for us who are victims or survivors under the Marcos administration, we strongly agreed with Tinay that it is not. We are abducted during the Marcos administration, and we are not the only ones who were attacked during this current administration. Because the machineries are still there. The machineries for human rights violations are still there. Even though already 2 UN special rapporteurs already recommended for the abolition of the NTF-ELCAC, it is still there. The ATA is still there and victimizing, continuing to victimize activists like us. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank the three of you for your statements, bravery, and I would like to thank you as well to share this with us, because I can understand that it's not easy. So thank you again. I would like to have the chance to take one or two Q&A maybe at the end. So I'm going to introduce Miss Aileen Bacarso. You're going to take the floor, and after this, if we have maybe one or two questions, because maybe you want to have some exchange with the floor. So Miss Aileen Bacarso is the Executive Director of Asian Forum for Human Rights and Development, Forum Asia, and she formerly worked as the Secretary General of the Asian Federation Against Involuntary Disappearances for 21 years. So she's going to give us her views on the Philippines, but also maybe on the region. So please, Aileen, take the floor. Do you want to stand? Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much, Magda, for that kind introduction. Organizers of this conference on the International Fair Trial Day, friends, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of my organization, the Asian Forum for Human Rights and Development, or Forum Asia, I would like to thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this international conference to commemorate the International Fair Trial Day. The Philippines, however, should not pride itself for having been chosen as the venue for this event because of its systemic violations of fair trial rights. We have listened to true-to-life testimonies of enforced disappearances and torture by Ms. Junila Castro and Jed and Mrs. Edita Burgos. I too vividly remember the brief enforced disappearance and torture of my husband exactly 2 months after our marriage during the supposedly democratic administration of the late President Corazon Aquino. Our stories are but a microcosm of the phenomenon of enforced disappearances and torture experienced by hundreds of victims in our country across administrations, from Marcos Sr. to Marcos Jr. The International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, or the Convention, states that, and I quote, enforced disappearance is considered to be the arrest, detention, abduction, or any other form of deprivation of liberty by agents of the state or by persons or groups of persons acting with the authorization, support, or acquiescence of the state, followed by a refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of liberty or by concealment of the fate or whereabouts of the victims, which places such a person outside the protection of the law, unquote. The Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhumane, and Degrading Treatment and Punishment states that, and I quote, Torture means any act of which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person for such purposes as obtaining from him or a third person information or a confession, punishing him for an act he or a third person has committed or is suspected of having committed, or intimidating or coercing him or a third person or any such reason based on discrimination of any kind when such pain or suffering is inflicted by or at the instigation of or with the consent or acquiescence of a public official or any other person acting in an official capacity, unquote. Enforced disappearances and torture are interrelated in many respects, such as manifested among others, the families of the disappeared feeling, excuse me, sorry. These are interrelated. Torture and enforced disappearances are interrelated in many respects. And these are manifested among others, like the families of the disappeared's feeling of swinging between hope and disillusionment, which is equated to psychological torture. Many victims of enforced disappearance who surfaced alive to tell their stories were tortured. Disappeared persons are at a high risk of torture since they are placed completely outside the protection of the law. Victims' lack of access to legal remedies puts them in a terrifying situation of complete defenselessness. And victims of enforced disappearances are also at a heightened risk of other human rights violations, such as sexual violence or even murder. In one of its reports, the Committee Against Torture of the UN further recalls that enforced disappearance entails multiple human rights violations and a failure by the state party concerned to comply with the obligations contained in the convention constitutes in itself, in relation to the disappeared person, or may constitute in relation to the person's relatives, a form of torture or inhuman treatment contrary to the convention. Enforced disappearances and torture are violations of the fundamental right to a fair trial. Victims are considered as enemies of the state, thus they were made to disappear and were tortured. In the Philippines, more than 5 decades have passed since the imposition of martial law by the first Marcos administration. And during these last more than 5 decades, we have been through the darkest night and the saddest of days, from the tyrannical and rapacious Marcos regime to the succeeding administrations of Corazon Aquino, Fidel Ramos, Joseph Estrada, Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, Rodrigo Duterte, and the incumbent President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Elements of transitional justice have been very elusive. Truth, justice, reparation, and guarantees of non-recurrence remain hollow bywords. A consequence of harsh repression, enforced disappearances is one of the cruelest forms of human rights violations committed both against the victims and their families. A deprivation of liberty, a concealment of the whereabouts of the victims, and state-perpetrated enforced disappearance violates several rights, both civil and political, as well as economic, social, and cultural rights, both of the direct victims and of their surviving family members. Among the rights violated include the right of recognition of a person before the law, the right to liberty and security, the right to a family life, and more importantly, the right not to be subjected to enforced disappearance. The first case of enforced disappearance occurred in 1971, a year before martial law was imposed by Ferdinand Marcos Sr. That was that of a university professor, Charlie Del Rosario. And this was followed by hundreds of cases of enforced disappearances that occurred across administrations. Victims came from the ranks of the farmers, workers, students, church people, urban poor, and other sectors. Human rights organizations has documented about 2,000 cases from Marcos to Marcos, but one case is worse enough. Recently, under the present administration of Marcos Jr., Karapatan has documented 1,908 cases since the martial law years of the former Marcos administration until the present. Under the present administration, which poses itself to be better compared with the former Duterte administration, Karapatan, as Mrs. Burgos mentioned, has recorded 14 cases of enforced disappearances, and of these 14 cases, many are breadwinners and largely belonged to the rural poor. Despite the enactment of the Republic Act 10353, which was signed into law by the late former President Benigno Aquino III, cases remain unabated. And despite states' recommendations and calls from victims' families, including a recommendation from the National Consultative Summit on enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings convened by the Supreme Court, the Philippine government refuses to ratify the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances. Obstacles to the convention's signature and ratification include the security sector's concern on issues of heavy accountability of the state, sovereignty and independence of national courts vis-a-vis the mandate of the treaty's Committee on Enforced Disappearances, and heavy reporting burden entailed in monitoring compliance. At the regional level in Asia, for many years, Asia is the region that submitted the highest number of cases to the United Nations Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances, but remains to have the lowest number of ratifications to the Convention Against Disappearances, and a region with a very limited number of domestic laws criminalizing enforced disappearances. To cite a few countries, in my years of work on enforced disappearances, I was exposed to this phenomenon in Indonesia, in Thailand, in India, Laos, Philippines, of course, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, South Korea, and Timor-Leste. Cases occurred against a backdrop of the struggle against dictatorships, fight for independence, war on terrorism, war on drugs. The Philippines and the rest of the region are marred by the situation of violations of fundamental freedoms, rising authoritarianism, and shrinking civic space, resulting in enforced disappearances, torture, extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detention. One in the same pain, in the same hope, in the same struggle, victims' families experience the devastating effects of this scourge. To name a few, the fear of death, stigmatization, emotional impact, economic dislocation, deteriorating health, absence of closure. But families of the victims refuse to succumb themselves into cowardice and oblivion. Let this day be a day of tribute to all victims of enforced disappearances, torture, extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detention, whose right to fair trial have been violated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Thank you all of you for this session. I think the most important part for me was, of course, the role of lawyers, because we are all lawyers here, and I'm going to remember your words on lawyers and on the hope you place in us, and I think that's very important, and also on the implementation of court decisions, and on impunity. And because we are lucky, it's going to be the topic of the next session. So I think we're going to wrap up. We unfortunately don't have time for any questions, but we're going to have a coffee break, maybe for 10 minutes, and you're going to have the chance maybe to ask questions during the coffee break if anyone has some. So thank you again, and meet in 10 minutes.
you for coming back so promptly. I hope you managed to get a coffee and a snack. We're almost there. We're starting the last session of the day before we move to the awards ceremony. My name is Trina Lenihan. I'm the International Policy Advisor on Rule of Law and Human Rights. Thank you, dear friends. At the Law Society of England and Wales. So we'll start our final session of the day before the award ceremony. We'll be looking at tackling impunity, which is a topic already mentioned by many of our speakers today, but we'll delve a bit deeper into not just the causes and impacts of impunity, but also looking to remedies and ways forward to ensure accountability. Unfortunately, the former Senator Leila de Lima was not able to join us today, so she was feeling unwell last minute, so we wish her a speedy recovery. And we'll continue with our two esteemed speakers. We'll start with Neri Colmenares, who's the chairman of the Bayan Muna party list and council member of the International Bar Association Human Rights Institute, and Human Rights Advisor to the Integrated Bar of the Philippines. Mr. Colmenares is a veteran human rights lawyer and activist who was himself detained for 4 years as one of the youngest political prisoners in the country at 18 years old when the Philippines was under martial law. In 2018, he filed a second petition accusing former President Duterte of murder and crimes against humanity before the International Criminal Court on behalf of 8 victims of the war on drugs, and he has challenged the constitutionality of the Philippine anti-terrorism law. In 2020, he received the Human Rights Award of the International Bar Association, and I believe you should be comfortable here, and you studied at the University of the Philippines College of Law as well, like some of our other speakers. So welcome, Neri, please, the floor is yours.
Hello. Thank you. I better time this. They're very strict with time. They only gave me 2 hours to speak here, so I have to. Yes, we have some slides to get on with it. The topics given to us in this this panel is about accountability, which of course is a good ending to the various panels which discussed various human rights violations. And in the end, the question is always, was justice done? Was justice accorded? And this is the panel that will sort of say, well, as we gathered through the various speakers, there has been no justice and accountability in the Philippines. So, first slide, please. There had been a lot of extrajudicial killings during the time of not just this administration or the previous administration, but for decades now. Decades. If we start with the time of President Ferdinand Marcos during martial law, at least 3,257 known extrajudicial killings. I say at least because there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of killed who were not documented or listed during one of the darkest periods of Philippine history during martial law. A case of 35,000 tortures. And 737 disappeared during that period. Those were the data I was able to gather. Was there justice to the generals and the Marcoses? None of the Marcoses spent one single day in prison. Their generals, the architects of martial law, were never made to account for all their heinous crimes during martial law. Then came Gloria Arroyo. This time, she targeted activists and dissenters, and at least 1,206 activists were killed. Many from our organization, political and mass organizations who were active in the movement of dissent at the time, were killed during the time of Gloria Arroyo. Then came Duterte. At least 6,252 cases of extrajudicial killings. If you look at the admission of the police, that they killed at least 6,252 drug suspects during the time in their drug war. But if you listen to the Commission on Human Rights, the various human rights groups, 10, 12, 15, 20,000 were killed during the time. 20,000, 25,000, or 6,252 people killed doesn't really matter. It's just one death too many. And not only that, at least 427 activists were killed during Duterte's period. Very few people remember those numbers. Everybody remembers the thousands and thousands of drug suspects killed, but the human rights defenders, 427 were killed. And 220 of them were human rights defenders, some, which includes human rights lawyers. During the time of Marcos, just 2 years of Marcos, at least 89 extrajudicial killings. And I heard from Christina this morning, it's 99. Is it 99 now? Okay. The extrajudicial killings continued and 13 cases of enforced disappearances. I was talking to Hans a while ago. I would want to stress, or give a story on enforced disappearance, but we don't have time for that. I'd probably like to just stress that enforced disappearance is increasing. As if the government believes that, oh, every time we kill activists, the international community stands up and complains, we better disappear them. At least nobody will really know, cannot really complain. They just disappeared anyway. So that's really horrible, because enforced disappearances is one of the most cruel forms of human rights violations, because unlike extrajudicial killings, and in my personal experience, I've seen a lot of cases of those, and there is no closure in cases of enforced disappearances. That's the condition during that time. And the problematic part there is that we have proven, many human rights lawyers have proven that these killings were state-sponsored killings. These were not random acts of crazy policemen, of deranged military sergeants. This is an issue of policy from the very top down, committed with the same form of modus vivendi. And our proof are, of course, the direct evidence, the testimony of witnesses, video, camera forensics, and so on. Dr. Fortune is here, and also survivors. There were cases when the victim survived, and they lived to tell the tale, and they point to the state security forces as the perpetrators of these crimes. Other than the direct testimony of the witnesses and the survivors, we also have established a pattern of evidence to show state complicity in many of these killings. The first is public vilification of the victims, called red tagging a while ago. When the government itself practically attacks the victim before the victim is killed. Oh, he's a drug suspect. Oh, he's an activist. Oh, he's a communist. He's a CPP, etc. And then the victim dies. Red tagging is not merely an act of libel. It's not merely an act of slander. It is actually a threat to your life. And that is the first proof we have that this is state-sponsored, because the government itself publicly vilified the victim before the victim was executed. The second is the brazenness with which the killings were committed in broad daylight, in public places, in markets, in public plazas, at times near police stations, as if the perpetrator was never afraid at all of being accosted by the police or being accosted by the authorities. The brazenness with which these were executed only shows state complicity in these actions. And the third part of the pattern which we have established as human rights lawyers is the complete lack of interest by government in investigating and prosecuting the case. Thousands have been killed in 6 years of Duterte, and yet the government admitted 52 cases were being investigated after thousands of deaths and 6 years of killings. the, I was one of the authors of the anti-torture law. I was one of the authors of the enforced disappearance law when I was in Congress. And during our sponsorship of these laws, before they were passed, colleagues in the House, in Congress, would debate with us saying, why do we need an enforced disappearance law? We have a law on kidnapping. We have a law on serious illegal detention. There's no need for that. And I have always explained to them during the debates in the House and even in the bicameral committee conference where we fought it out with some senators, this is not an ordinary case of kidnapping. This is state perpetrated. And the moment an act of serious illegal detention or kidnapping is committed by the state, it transforms the nature of the crime from an ordinary kidnapping by a syndicate or a private individual into a state machinery, which is more difficult to arrest, too sophisticated, and of course, lack of accountability in the end. And so this is the issue. We have always said that this is part of a state-sponsored killing and human rights violations, and yet accountability was never an issue there. Next slide, please. We have a lot of laws in our Constitution. Do you know that under our Constitution, Article 3, Section 12, enshrines the Miranda rights? One of the few constitutions in the world which probably enshrined the Miranda rights. Still there in the Constitution. That you have the right to remain silent, you can't be tortured, in counsel, independent counsel, and so on. We have a lot of laws. We have RA 9851. This is a Philippine law practically implementing the Rome Statute of the ICC. This penalizes IHL violations, crimes against humanity, and genocide. There are laws, RA 10353, which I mentioned a while ago, which we helped author, enforced disappearance, torture. There's even a law, rights of persons arrested, detained under custodial investigation. And yet, despite these laws, no accountability was ever done. And I think Tinay and the others have already discussed why. Next slide, please. Just like to cite to you one reason which is why there is impunity here. Under the rules of engagement of the police, it says, in cases of armed confrontation wherein a suspect dies, the team leader of the operating unit shall submit the incident for inquest before the duty inquest prosecutor. Which means, in a police operation, if there is a death, then the police, under the rules, should have an inquest investigation. So what does it mean? There were 6,252 deaths in the drug war, for example. There should have been 6,252 inquests, at the very least. But no, they did not do that. Why? Because the moment the police who admits to shooting the victim claims, oh, it was self-defense, nanlaban, he fought back. Then the police and then the prosecutor, the inquest, okay, so you self-defense, so dismissed. We have been saying all along, human rights law, you cannot dismiss that case. You are the prosecutor. Is there probable cause in the case? Yes, of course, he admitted to killing the man, right? Well, but nanlaban, he just self-defense. That is for him to prove in court. You have to file. The prosecutor has to file a case in court. And let the police officer defend himself or herself under these rules. Self-defense. But no, the police investigators and the prosecutors at times became the judge, jury, and executioner, dismissing cases left and right, merely because of a claim of self-defense. But I'll point to you a very strange case of Kadungog. Kadungog was the driver of a city councilor in Cebu. He could have been a victim of extrajudicial killings. They noticed a riding in tandem, surveilling them. In the end, when they were about to be shot by a riding in tandem, Kadungog, the driver, shot the two men in the motorcycle. The two men died. And then upon investigation, they found that the two men were police officers. But this time around, it's the reverse. The would-be victim shot to death, the riding in tandem. But what did the prosecution do? Of course, the kadungog was saying self-defense too. But what did the prosecution say? The DOJ prosecutors filed homicide cases arguing that the claim of self-defense needs to be raised in courts. DOJ, the Department of Justice, said, while the prosecutors believed that Makaslang did not have any intention to kill Police Officer 3 Kalumba, they said his claim of self-defense could be best threshed out in court. Precisely. So why do you have a different set of rules for the police and a different set of rules for people like Kadungog ang Makaslang? That is the root of impunity. When the law is used against activists, against dissenters, against drug suspects, and the law is used in favor of the perpetrators. Next slide, please. So, we'll probably end with why is there impunity? One of the main reasons was read by, I think, Edre and many speakers here already. The nature of the state security forces and government. The government basically forwards or carries the interest not of the Filipino people, but the interest of a vested elite. And that is why, in cases where government policies repress the people, exploit the people, and the people are either victims of mining or corruption or any form of abuse, the people protest, right? And because the people protest, the tendency, the nature of the state security forces is to repress any form of dissent. And one of the reasons for this is government's intolerance of dissent. If government were only tolerant of dissent, many of these cases will not even happen. They're just rallying. Jed and Dunila, they're complaining, criticizing government against a reclamation project, but, that's their right. No, they're complaining about the project. The project means a lot of money for us. Let's kidnap them because they're so noisy. Oh, let's kill Ben Ramos. He is so noisy representing farmers and, filing cases against the Sagay massacre. Government's intolerance of dissent and the nature of government to represent not the people, but the vested elite. And of course, the state protection of perpetrators, another reason for the impunity. The state coddles them. When we look at accountability in human rights violations, we do not only go against the perpetrator, not just the perpetrator, but there is also what I call the infrastructure of impunity. And what is the infrastructure of impunity? It's the police who don't want to investigate. It's the fiscal who doesn't want to prosecute. It's a judge who is fearful of making a decision that will convict a general or a colonel of the army. They are the infrastructures of impunity. They did not pull the trigger. But when they whitewash a case and protect the perpetrators, that is as if they were the ones who helped pull the trigger that killed so many of the Filipinos. So the infrastructure of impunity must be a part of the accountability mechanisms we are looking for. Not just the looking for the perpetrators, but those who support the perpetrators from getting away with it. And I'd like to also raise an additional reason for impunity is the linear justice system. Our justice system is very linear. It has to be, there's a complaint, and then to the police goes to the prosecutor files a case. If that is static, not dynamic, you cut anywhere along the line, impunity reigns. You cut anywhere along that line. One, grassroots impunity. Grassroots impunity is when the victims or the families of the victims are too scared to file a complaint. The moment it happens, then you have impunity. Second is investigatorial impunity. Oh, the victim sometimes file a complaint, but the police refuses to do serious investigation. Oh, the bullets got mislaid, the photos. I'm sure Dr. Fortune can explain some of that later. So, then if there is no investigation, impunity reigns. Because the prosecutor will wait for this. The prosecutor will not go to the police. Oh, no, you finalize your investigation. You do well. Your investigation is haphazard. Do it well. Unlike we see some district attorneys in some TV shows that the district attorney trying to find the evidence. Yeah, here, no prosecutor rests. I can't be active in investigation. Let the police do that. I have no duty to do that. So since it's passive, the moment this doesn't file, prosecutor doesn't act. Sometimes there is a filing of a complaint, but there's prosecutorial impunity when the prosecutor refuses to file an information in court. And of course, the fourth is failure of the judicial system to exact accountability. We have a very linear justice system. One depends on the other. So that it's very easy for the perpetrators to just cut it anywhere along the line. And impunity will reign. You just threaten the victim. Victim is afraid, police will no longer investigate. Oh, we can't investigate, the victims will not cooperate. That's not how justice system works, but that's how it works here. And that explains to some degree, to an extent, why impunity exists. So in the end, I'll probably end with two pictures and one question. Next slide, please. This President Duterte, I don't care about human rights, believe me. Kill them, shoot them. That's what he said. Doesn't believe. So, does he have a very dismal and horrible human rights record? Yes. In the first place, he admitted openly that he doesn't believe in human rights. Next slide, please. This president had a State of a Nation address. Did he say anything about human rights? No. Didn't mention one word about human rights in the State of the Nation address. So the question is this: which one is worse? A Duterte which openly said, I don't believe in human rights, or a Marcos which said nothing about human rights? They're both the same. You cannot exculpate one over the other. Oh, Duterte is worse. He said, fuck you, human rights. Marcos didn't say anything. It is as if Marcos was complicit in the human rights violations of all those committed by Duterte. But not only that, the extrajudicial killings continue even during his time. So this is an issue about some people would like to compare. Oh, which is better, which is worse? No, it's just one killing too many. Whether it's 6,252 or 99 activists killed under Marcos, it's the same. These are heinous crimes that must be stopped, and accountability must be achieved. I'd like to end with, I always want to quote this in the forums because I'd like to end with hope. Why people always ask me, Neri, don't you ever get tired? You were a human rights advocate when you were 18 years old. That's why you have to spend 4 years in prison. You're still working on human rights. Now, you are 42 years old. I don't like the way you laugh at my age. Okay, 45. Okay, 45. Let's end there. So they always say, don't you feel tired? I said, I really felt, Marcos was one of the most. But, there are two basic principles that keeps us going. And one of the basic principles that keep us, human rights lawyers and activists, human rights defenders, and all of us probably, going is first trust. We continue to fight for social reforms because of trust. We trust in the capacity of the Filipino people to change this society for the better. That is one thing we never let go. Because the moment you lose your trust on the Filipino people and you say, mga Pilipino, walang mangyayari dyan. Ganun talaga mga Pilipino, wala yan. Then we better go to sleep, right? But we continue to trust in that capacity of the Filipino people. Marcos was one of the most powerful dictators in the world during martial law. He was the executive because he was the president. He issued laws called presidential decrees, laws. Therefore, he was also the legislature. And he issued warrants of arrest. My arrest was by virtue of a warrant of arrest signed by Marcos when I was 18. Therefore, he was also the judiciary. That's why he was called the dictator, because he was the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. But lo and behold, he was very powerful. But one fateful day of February of 1986, the Filipino people stood up and said, enough. And one of the most powerful dictators in the world was overthrown. Trust in that capacity of a people to change society for the better. And that's the most important principle. Once you trust, inevitably you have to go to the next most important principle, which is hope. Because you trust, therefore you hope. You hope that there will come a time when justice will be accorded to the oppressed people of the Philippines. When those who held sway over our lives for so long will merit the accountability that they so richly deserve. And that is what keeps us going. And I'm sure each and every one of you has that trust and hope in your hearts. Why? Because you're here. If you don't hope, you'll probably say, oh, another forum in the Malcolm Hall. Nothing will come out of it. But no, you're here. That's why you continue to hope. And that's the most important part of the struggle. Because you trust, therefore you hope. And because you hope, therefore you struggle. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Neri. I think there might be some problem with the timer on your phone, but also I think
I couldn't see it, so.
if the coffee didn't wake everyone up and if we didn't already feel impassioned about these issues, I think both of those things have certainly happened now. So thank you so much for your contributions. We'll come back maybe on remedies more and ways forward, but first I want to bring Sidney in on that. So Sidney Paulson is the Senior Human Rights Advisor to the UN in the Philippines since July 2020, providing advice on mainstreaming human rights in the UN's work in the Philippines and contributing to programmatic work, including the UN Joint Programme on Human Rights. Ms. Paulson has previously held human rights positions for the UN in South Korea, Papua New Guinea, Timor-Leste, Kyrgyzstan and Liberia, so a very broad perspective and experience you're bringing to the discussions today. So thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, and I think I'll just stay here because I'm only going to speak 1.5 hours, so I'm a little shorter than you, but I almost feel like we should have ended the panel on this on this note. It's almost like it's a little postscript here. So I will not repeat everything because it was very already summed up, and we've heard from so many people today who have personal experiences, and I think there's nothing I can contribute to adding to that. But from the UN, there's one word I would like to add to trust and hope, and that's prepare. Prepare because there are things we can do and there are things we cannot affect immediately. And of course, the timeline for how we prepare and how we trust and what we do will differ. It's different if your son is missing, or if you are a disappeared person in an unknown detention center, or if you're a UN official looking for long institutional change. Timelines are variable, and I think it's important to keep this in mind, because we are all working towards the same goal, but we are all doing it in our own, hopefully in the ways where we can contribute most, but contribute towards that path together. And I want to start a bit with what the UN's path on the Philippines was. It starts a long time ago, of course, and it really originates from civil society and all the reports that came to the UN on the violations in many administrations, but then culminating perhaps under the previous administration. And based on all of these reports, the UN actually did get together and drafted a report on the human rights situation that was published in 2020. Many of you in here contributed to that. And based on that, we managed to pass a resolution in the Human Rights Council. And just to remind ourselves that where we were in 2020, the resolution says, it underlines the importance of the government to ensure accountability for human rights violations and abuses, and in this regard to conduct independent, full and transparent investigations, and to prosecute all those who have perpetrated serious crimes, including violations and abuses of human rights. And this resolution that was based on this sort of request was a resolution that provided for technical cooperation by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in order to assist the government in achieving this accountability. And we must admit somehow that the resolution was received it was a kind of tepid, I should say, reception. On one hand, yes, it was good that there was a resolution. But on the other hand, there were many who wanted less, who said, no, it's a Philippine problem, it has to be solved domestically. There were others, probably many in this room, who wanted much more, a commission of inquiry, say, to really uncover all of the violations and the scope and extent. The punchline here is, of course, that both were correct. Of course, we need to be insistent on documenting, reporting, uncovering the violations that occur. And of course, the problem, while it can be raised by the international community, ultimately needs to be resolved by Filipinos in the Philippines, because you have your own judicial system. The ICC, the Human Rights Council, yes, they can support, they can do some things, they may even prosecute a few people. But broad and thick impunity, accountability rather, has to happen in the Philippines. So with this lukewarm, shall we say, resolution, we did, I think, create a space for initiating some activities. Not full solutions, not perfect solutions, but steps towards, and this is where my word of prepare comes in, towards, at the time when there is a political will, being ready and having the capacity to addressing these violations. And I'm saying this because when we talk about the joint program, which is of course what was based on this resolution, the joint program is not and was never intended as an accountability mechanism. It was a technical cooperation program. And that was very clear from the beginning. The intention was, of course, that the government would buy into it and would then speed up its efforts towards accountability. And when Carlos Conde said that failed, that is quite true, because we have not, there are many, many cases still that haven't been tried. But the failure, I think, we cannot put with a technical cooperation program. We have to place that somewhere else. So what are the kinds of things that can be done through preparing, through such technical cooperation? I think it's things like supporting those civil society organizations that are working at the grassroots level, to provide direct support to victims, protection, and also, of course, networks that work throughout the country and lawyers' organizations that provide free legal aid. All of those kinds of initiatives, I think the other thing one can do is provide technical expertise from other countries in areas such as investigations into unlawful deaths, documentation, forensic capacity, Dr. Fortune, and hopefully through that not only raise domestic capacities, but also create a momentum towards establishing those institutions that need to be established, such as a forensic institute. Advocacy for legal reform. So while, yes, it's true that there are a parade of laws protecting human rights, there are also still gaps. Gaps, for example, in the legislation to establish a national preventive mechanism on torture, lack of a charter to protect, to establish the mandate of the Commission on Human Rights, which is a very important institution, and even things like anti-discrimination legislation, which perhaps doesn't have an obvious link to impunity and accountability, but sends a very clear message about equality that also translates into equality under the law. So those are just a few examples of things that have been done and can be done. We have a memorandum order now, which is not enough, but for example, asks prosecutors to become more active in investigations. These are all small steps, but I believe they are cumulative, and I believe they can help support this broader infrastructure, this ecosystem we need around accountability. And that's not to say that they will solve the whole problem, because of course these are deep-seated and long-standing issues. But I wanted perhaps to draw out a few points that I think we've observed, and they've actually been reaffirmed today also, on learnings around how to address this impunity/accountability issue. And I think the first thing that really stands out is impunity. Yes, it's about the law, but it's primarily about commitment and behavioral change. So how do you get cultures within the police, within the judiciary, where the behavior is expected to be protection and upholding human rights, where police see themselves, sees their primary duty as one where they protect rights, not where they uphold an operational guide or manual. That's, I think, the first one. And this takes time. Behavioral change is not something that happens just naturally. The second one, which I already alluded to, is the need for legal national frameworks that uphold international standards. The third one is something about norms and norms-based institutions. Again, an independent judiciary, law enforcement agencies that actually know the law. As we've seen, there are a number of provisions that are not followed always. And key institutions that have a role to protect human rights. And we have some fairly new institutions also established, the Human Rights Affairs Office in the police, for example, who are taking an increasing interest in documenting human rights cases, a Human Rights Office in the Department of Justice. So we need to engage more with these mechanisms and make them work for us, I think, for human rights. The final thing is really a lot of this depends on the role of civil society. A strong civil society that can hold these institutions accountable, that can push the laws forward, and that can speak out strongly. And to do that, of course, and we've heard nothing else today, there needs to be a framework in place that protects those who speak out. a law on human rights defenders, punishment of those who harass or threaten, and clear messages from the very highest level of government, not a blank slate. So I think with this I will finish, and perhaps you have questions and other comments. But maybe also Dr. Fortune wants to add something.
Certainly, yes. Thank you, Sidney. And apologies if we put you on the spot, but Dr. Fortune, your name has been thrown around a few times in this session, so we would like to give you an opportunity to come in. I'm sure she needs no introduction for the people in the room, but for the benefit of our international audience joining online, Dr. Raquel Fortune is the first forensic pathologist working in the Philippines. She's a professor at the College of Medicine here at the University of the Philippines and is the current chairperson for the Department of Pathology. So please.
Good afternoon. I'm not part of the program. Do I get 2 hours too? Because I can go on and on and on, speaking for the dead. Listening to the earlier speakers, names come up, cases I know about. And, the frustration is really deeply rooted. The big elephant in the room is we do not investigate properly in the Philippines. It's as simple as that. You talk of how deplorable killings of judges and lawyers are, but it doesn't matter who is the victim. I'm seeing the extreme cases of the war on drugs victims, and I tell you, they were the poorest of the poor targeted. Okay? And I'm speaking to you from the point of view of forensic science, and that is sadly what we lack. We do not have a system for these things. You spoke of impunity. It happens because, the killers investigate themselves. It's as simple as that, and that's how you get away with murder. And if you look at how they do it abroad, again, from the point of view of forensic science, in particular forensic pathology, the forensic pathologist is the medical examiner. They step in when there is a killing. They keep track of the numbers. We don't even have that. If you have the missing and the dead, there is a system to match them. I was listening to Mrs. Burgos. I tried to help her out, looking for her son before. And that's it. We exhumed the case through CHR, thinking it could be him, but it was just a random, I'm sorry to say that, victim. He was strangled and shot in the head. And since no family came forward to identify him, to claim him, he was buried in the cemetery. No records. And when we went there was just a cross, black pen on the wall, and then the sepultureros or the cemetery caretakers saying, oh, there's a body there, that's where we buried him. They even changed his shirt because they felt pity on him or something like that. So that was not Jonas, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm sorry. But who was that person? And precisely, we don't have a system. You have missing people. Where do you go to? Nowadays, we have social media. You just post something there, hoping that somebody recognizes and tells you information. And at the same time, you have dead bodies here and there all over the country. But how do you match them? And in the absence of forensic science and some organization about how you do the matching, that's how you get away with murder easily. Okay, so my frustration is, that's it. From forensic science, we hardly use it. We pretend when we do our investigations. And right now, I have several bodies waiting for me in the morgue. I am behind by so many reports. I was happy listening to Jolina and Jed. Okay? You know why? Again, I'm sorry to be morbid. I am seeing young women like them. I'm sorry to say this, but this is the reality. Riddled with bullets, killed by state agents, the military, and the police. And the only thing I can do is I examine the bodies. I tried. We do x-rays. I found a lot of bullets on them. Also the cases of the war on drugs victims. And the frustration is, okay, I document the findings as best as I can. I recover the bullets, but they have to go somewhere else. But who do I give the bullets to? The police, the military, but they control everything. The crime lab, the ballistics experts. And that's why I'm looking forward to foreign help coming in. ICC, for instance. Not just the judges, the lawyers, but the investigators, because could you please look at the bullets that I have? Because I need help. I do my part, which is just a piece of the puzzle. I tell you how this person was shot, that's really him or her, identity, cause, manner of death. I recover the evidence, I document. But many times that is not enough. I have had cases where that's it, I did my part, but the CSI was not done. Why? This is Jemboy Baltazar. Police riddled him with bullets, and they picked up the casings. So there's nothing there. I only had the body, already embalmed, but still. He was shot in the head, he was shot in the hand. I could say that he was shot in the boat. I wanted to see the boat to check for the bullet impact marks, to recover the bullets. I see that a lot. Police released the scene already, but the bullets are still there. They do an autopsy on the body, but the bullets are still there. So it's very frustrating. And then what did the judge do in that Baltazar case? He ruled on the basis of I suspect, one casing that was linked to the gun of a police. What about the others? So it's very, very frustrating. And my 2 hours are up. I tell you I can say a lot more, but I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fortune, and we could also listen to you for a lot longer if we had more time. So thank you also for the work that you're doing. And this comes back to Sinye's point about prepare, I guess, and we do what we can, and we'll have a report coming out of this event and this day for the International Fair Trial Day in the Philippines. So maybe we can include some clear recommendations, including the increase in forensic capacity, which won't be the first time it's been recommended, I'm sure, but we'll can include clear asks and look forward to hopefully the creation of an institute. So thank you all for your time and attention. This concludes our session. Thank you. We'll move now to the award ceremony, so the best part of the day. And we'll ask the moderator for the award ceremony to join us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Now, I would like to officially open the 2024 Ebru Timtik Award ceremony. My name is Marion Bouchetel. I am a French lawyer working in Greece in the defense of migrants' rights, and I represent the ELDH, a European Lawyers Association. I am actually replacing my dear colleague Jeren Wischel, who couldn't join us today because she had a last-minute medical condition. So yes, I will try to take over. And we are very sorry that she cannot join us today. I would like to start with some opening remark about the award. Ebru Timtik was one of 18 lawyers in Turkey, members of the Progressive Lawyers Association, CHD. Some working at the People's Law Office who were prosecuted in the Istanbul 37th Assize Court and accused of membership in a terrorist organization. She and her colleagues were convicted on the 20th of March 2019 after a trial that ignored all basic procedural standards and internationally recognized fair trial principles. Her conviction was based on inconsistent testimony from anonymous witnesses and unauthenticated documents from Belgium and Dutch authorities, to which her lawyers had no access. The defense also couldn't access original digital documents allegedly seized in a musical center. Defense lawyers were frequently prevented from participating in the proceedings. These trial defects led Ebru Timtik and her colleague Aytaç Ünsal to begin a death fast following a hunger strike on the 5th of April 2020. The 5th of April 2020 is also Turkey's Day of the Lawyer. Sadly, on the 27th of August 2020, Ebru Timtik died while protesting her innocence and the lack of fair trial principles in the criminal justice system. In recognition of her sacrifice and to draw attention to the plight of those globally facing unfair trials, International Bar Association and lawyer organization have established an annual International Fair Trial Day on the 14th of June. So this year is the 4th year of its observance. And alongside this day, the annual Ebru Timtik Award recognizes individuals or organizations who are making exceptional contributions to securing fair trial rights in the country of focus for that year. Now that the ceremony is open, I would like to call the first persons who will intervene, namely Herman Verbeek and Etienne Lesage. We lost the sofa. So, or maybe if you want to sit, Etienne, and you can join afterward, if, yeah, or sit. So first of all, Herman Verbeek will open the ceremony. He is a Dutch attorney, a supervisory board member for Free Press Unlimited, and a representative of the Foundation of the Day of the Endangered Lawyer. He previously worked with Amnesty International Netherlands, and he also served as advisor to the Dutch Ministry of Finance on human rights violation related to the social benefits system. Thank you, Herman.
Wow, it's good to see so many young faces here in this room. No one above 42. Many students, we're all students, will remain students forever, probably. Luckily, promoters of the principle of fair trial can be found everywhere, in many circles in each society. I will quote one well-known voice here in the Philippines. He recently criticized a very early stage of the stage of the criminal process. It's the practice of arrests. I quote, "I strongly condemn the use of excessive and unnecessary force in serving the warrant of arrest. Will this overkill be the trademark of this administration when dealing with individuals who are merely accused of committing a crime and not have been proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt? How can this administration guarantee the preservation of the constitutional rights of our fellow Filipinos when even the most fundamental of these rights are being trampled upon and blatantly violated? These activist words come from the former President Duterte. They come out of a formal statement, a press release that was made only 4 days ago, when a supporter in Mindanao, when a supporter of his in Mindanao was arrested, and the police was well prepared for a difficult task to arrest. Today, we have been discussing fair trials and the deviation thereof, foul play trials, and of course, the ultimate opposite of a fair trial, impunity, which is no trial at all. In the Philippines Supreme Court Strategic Plan for Judicial Innovations 2022 to 2027, reference is made to the concept of the 5 pillars of the criminal justice system. These 5 pillars are the courts, the prosecutors, the law enforcers, the administrators of the penal system, and the community. In this concept of the 5 pillars of criminal justice, as used by the Supreme Court, I think one player in the criminal justice system is not granted the essential place that he or she should have, the defense lawyer. I believe that the criminal justice system can better be drawn like a triangle. The role of the defense lawyer representing the suspect is so core to the rule of law that he or she forms a perfectly balanced triangle together with the judge and the public prosecutor. These 3 corners are the most important. Structured communication between these 3 parties, each having its own role, is the core of due process. It should be a perfect balanced shape. For this triangle, a musical instrument is required to sound pure and clear when played. And of course, the judge is at the top of the triangle. Perhaps he is in many ways the top of the legal food chain. He is the master of the process, but he is not the composer. He is not the conductor determining the tune. Judges can be activists, which is a good thing. In the US, you have very active trial judges, and I believe in the Philippines, this is the same. That is good. Most Europeans only know that from courtroom drama out of Hollywood. The downside risk, of course, is that the voice of the judge is so loud that it dominates the communications and relevant facts and circumstances cannot be heard. Last week, our Caravana Filipina, traveling through the Philippines, we spoke to a Philippine lawyer who said to us, "Be careful with the rule of law, as the law may be used by perpetrators. It may be used for the wrong cause against good people. The legal institutions can be weaponized, leading to lawfare." In too many countries, prosecutors, but also other government officials, are used as a weapon against individuals. In my country, it was the tax collector who pressed approximately 30,000 families into misery for no good reason at all, and without these people having had access to justice. It was a blind hunt to punish fraud that led to fraud tagging, wrongfully fraud tagging, without court involvement. And harsh collection measures could be taken against these families. Now we are in a stage where we are trying to repair. At a certain moment, the word prepare felt, and I thought, hey, this is repairs, but it was prepare. Well, I would say prepare for repair. In our country, we're busy with the repairs, and I was honored to be a member of an independent committee to advise the Ministry of Finance in such cases. And I know that in England today, a very similar, or a rather similar scandal is developing, the post office masters. I think that a golden rule from Guideline 12 of the UN Guidelines on the Role of Prosecutors should apply to all civil servants to ensure that this triangle sounds pure. Civil servants shall, in accordance with the law, perform their duties fairly, consistently, and expeditiously, and respect and protect human dignity and uphold human rights. Now I come to speak on the last corner of the triangle, the lawyer. Of course, if the lawyer is harassed, intimidated, or even killed, there is no fair trial for the client. Client has a problem, but it's not the problem of the client alone. It's a problem, of course, for the lawyer, his family, his colleagues. And for the lawyer, I spoke on this topic with a Philippine attorney this week, and he said this: "You must be damn stupid to do human rights related legal work in the Philippines. It's simply illogic." And a judge was quoted who said, "These risks are inherent to the legal profession in the Philippines." This problem is not a private lawyer's problem. Apart from his family members and colleagues, it's a problem for us all. You may have heard of this famous English poet, John Donne, who had a beautiful poem, "No man is an island entirely on itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clot be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, the world is the less." That's what I added to it, because it hurts us all, community. So this remark of the Philippine attorney, I see that as a call to fight attacks, to fight against attacks on lawyers in their role in the triangle of the justice system. We should fight for a fair trial. And some fair trial fighters died for this cause. I would like to mention here, and he has been mentioned before, the late Philippine attorney Rex Fernandez, one of the founders of one of the co-hosts here today, and UPL. He was killed in Cebu by an unknown hitman in 2021, a few days after he held a hunger strike because the management of a condominium cut off water supply despite a court injunction. He was a noble knight fighting for justice. I would like to mention here as well Attorney Benjamin Ramos. He has also been referred to earlier this day. He is of Negros, and he was killed while handling multiple cases of farmers and fishermen and the Sagay massacre. These are examples, and there are many more in the Philippines and outside the Philippines. Examples like the Kurdish lawyer Ebru Timtik. Persons fighting to keep the triangle in shape and pure. Thinking of those who gave their lives for this cause, I think of John Donne's poem, "No Man is an Island," when he refers to the death bells tolling to call us all to the funeral. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sent to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. All of these cases, and many others, are now cold. I hope and pray that one day, rather sooner than later, the long list of such cold cases will become hot, very hot. It's time. And we have hope. It has been said this morning by Dean Darlene at her birthday. Neri has referred to it. There is hope. I see the young faces. I see the students here in this room gathered together. We have our younger generations. We have a free press. We must cherish the free press. Keep on informing ourselves, educate ourselves, listen more to others, speak up loud when really needed, and mobilize others when really needed. And we need examples. For us, the Kurdish lawyer Ebru Timtik is a great example. An award for a fighter for fair trials may never be announced unless the organization has clearly demonstrated how the decision was reached and what are the arguments for the decision. Since 1927, English law landmark case, we all know not only justice must be done, it must also be seen done. I expect that the announcement in this ceremony of the winner, of this year's winner of the Ebru Timtik Award, is the fruit of a fair process. Let's sit and see how the jury comes with the verdict. This must have been a very difficult task for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herman. And now, before Etienne Lesage joins us, we will first watch a short video about Ebru.
Değerli meslektaşlarımız, yoldaşlarımız, hakkımızda ferman yürütmüş ağır ceza reisleri, alay eder gibi bizimle 8 saat evveli verdikleri hükmü geri almışlar. Tutsak edeceklermiş bizi. Alnımızın ak cefasıdır elbet. Ama alay da ettirmeyiz kendimizle. 4 sene evvel açılan davamıza 2 gizli tanık ekleyerek bizi zindanlarına hapsetmek istiyorlar. Bizi başlarından uzaklaştırmak istiyorlar. Bizsiz daha kolay zulmedeceklerini, adaletsizlik yapabileceklerini düşünüyorlar. Öyle sessiz sedasız bizi zindanlara gömemeyeceksiniz. Açlık grevi bugüne kadar her vakit adaletsizliğe karşı yapılmıştır. 84, 96, 2000 yıllarında Türkiye hapishanelerinde yürütülen açlık grevleri gibi Nazım Hikmet'in açlık grevi de adalet özlemini dile getiriyordu. Roma İmparatoru Tiberius zamanında çevresindeki işkence ve cinayete, yani asıl olarak adaletsizliğe tahammül edemeyen biri vardı açlık grevi yapan. Bu kişi bir avukattı. Avukat Nerva. Bir avukat açlık grevi yapar mı diyenlere soruyoruz. Avukat avukatlık yapamıyorsa adalet istemekten vaz mı geçsin? Adalet ekmek gibi, su gibi lazımken hem de. Biliyoruz. Bu açlık faşizmi utandırmaz. Ama dostlarımızın yüreğini yakar. Ama adaletin açlığını çekenleri harekete geçirir. Biz faşizmi tanıyoruz. Bizim güvendiğimiz sizsiniz. Adaletin yılmaz savunucularına dayıyoruz biz sırtımızı. Kalbini kalbime bağladığım dostlarımı, yoldaşlarımı açlığımla kucaklıyorum. Bir ömür açlığı sunabileceğimi de bilsinler.
After these very sad but also inspiring images, I would like to welcome Etienne Lesage. Etienne Lesage is a lawyer from the Paris Bar Association with over 30 years of practice. He's currently serving as the vice president of Défense Sans Frontières Avocats Solidaires. He closely monitored the trial of Ebru Timtik and her colleagues, frequently visiting Turkey but also advocating for her freedom.
Thank you very much, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, dear future colleagues, I hope, students. It is an honor to be here in the Philippines to evoke the souvenir, the memory of Ebru Timtik that I knew very well, because when I started to go to Turkey as a defense lawyer, as an international observer, first as a member of the board of the Paris Bar Association, then for the National Council of Bar of France, then for the UIA, Union Internationale des Avocats. I'm the chair of the criminal committee of this association, of this international association of lawyers. And then for DSF, Defense Without Borders, Défense Sans Frontières Avocats Solidaires, we all do the same mission. We defend lawyers endangered. Lawyers at risk because they exercise their profession as it has been told by so many of you since this morning. And as an international observer, as an international lawyer, criminal lawyer, I am not involved in politics. I don't mind political ideas of the lawyers I defend. As a lawyer, we defend anyone who needs us, who calls us. Ebru was much involved in politics, especially defending people from her country. She was Turkish, but she was especially Kurdish. And she was a member of CHD, political party defending Kurdish identity. That was a fight. Not only her fight, but the fight of her sister as well, who is still imprisoned. And the fight of so many lawyers I have met along the years, going to follow many cases, many trials, because there are so many trials against lawyers in Turkey. Not only lawyers who are supposed to defend so-called terrorists because they are for the liberty, because they fight for their identity. Not only them. I used to go to Turkey a lot for DSF, for UAE, for the Paris Bar, for proceedings launched by the Turkish state, the Turkish prosecutor against the bar associations. And even the president of the Ankara Bar Association, the president of the Istanbul Bar Association, and all the members of his board, the president of the Izmir Bar Association, were all at trials because for freedom of speech. And once all of them criticized the chief of the religious authority in Turkey, which is not supposed to be a religious state. The religion is not supposed to be affiliated to the state. It's what we call un pays laïque, which is it's impossible to translate in English. But in France, we say we are a country laïque, where religious affairs and politics affairs are separated for the good of everyone. That's supposed to be the case of Turkey. But all the bar association were sued because it criticized the chief of the religious authority, who has no legal power, because he said that COVID-19, the pandemic, was due to LGBT plus Q people, stuff like this. And they were all risking years of imprisonment because of their declaration. Anyway, let's go back to Ebru. You see, Ebru, I met her at the prison of Silivri, which is about 100 kilometers out of Istanbul. It's a prison where you have 40,000 detainees. Among them at the time, it was in 2019, I met her 2 or 3 times along the year, and I was so surprised by her personality, so amazed, so seduced, because she was so charismatic. And though she was imprisoned, though she knew she was going to stay, she was supposed to stay in prison for years and years, like so many of our colleagues, because they do their work, because there are no real criminal charged against them. They are charged because they defend their clients. and it's so easy when you are sued for belonging to terrorist organizations to have someone on the phone and to be considered as accomplished, though you are the lawyer of the person. And she, in the prison, you saw in the film her smile. She was always smiling. She was full of energy. She seemed, looked so happy. And she told me, you know, I like to sing, I write songs, I write poems. And I said, do you? Please, I want your poems, because I editate for the Paris Bar Association a literary review for lawyers, write literature, not law, literature. And we convinced that she would send me some of her poems. And then she started her hunger strike. And after a few months, as we all know, she died in the Silivri prison. There is a last picture of her that you haven't seen in that film. I would say, fortunately. She is behind her bars in her cell, weighing her weight about 32 kilos, just a few days before she died. And she is smiling to life and smiling to the fight she was involved in. So she was a great, charismatic woman. I had some slides, but just to show you how we published her poems after her death. That was the 6th number of the literary review of the Paris Bar Association. And you see, so that's the first page, number 6. And that's someone I don't know. And these are the names of the lawyers published. And here you have Ebru Timtik, among lots of French lawyers who published poems, extract of books, novels, everything. And you have Ebru Timtik. And we were to have Cheren, who organized everything. And you know Cheren, our Turkish-Kurdish colleagues, who cannot live in Turkey anymore. And she organized everything. She gathered all the lawyers from all over the world to defend the colleagues that still need lawyers, international observers in Turkey. And I can tell you that there are a lot. And Cheren is such a good person too, because she organizes everything. Unfortunately, after 5 or 6 days with you guys in a fact-finding mission here in the Philippines to visit the people who needed to have the visits of lawyers, she is badly hurt on her right hand, and hopefully, we all hope she'll feel better. And she was supposed to be online to read an extract of the poem. So I know that another colleague is supposed to read it. Maybe we have a technical problem? No? Ah, that's fantastic. Fantastic. So, and I just wanted to say that among the people here, we have our distinguished colleague Edre, who's always here for Ebru. And we had a symposium in Athens in April in the memory of Ebru. Why in Athens, not in Turkey? Because all of the lawyers cannot go to Turkey. I cannot go to Turkey anymore. Last time I wanted to go, I was banned for 10 years because they don't want to see me there anymore. Anyway, let's listen to this is this is the colleague that who is going to read one of Ebru's poem. And please introduce yourself and we listen to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Etienne, and all the other colleagues who are there. It's really meaningful to be a part of this, and I think it's something that I can't value. I'm a member of Turkish Association of Law. We call it Çeharem. I know some of you are familiar with the name. It's also can be translated as Progressive Lawyers Association. And I'm a proud member of this organization and also a follower of the path where Ebru and our beloved colleagues have opened and walked through. So I would like to read the poem Ebru wrote when she was in prison, and it is I'm going to read it in Turkish, but it is about producing behind the walls. How she managed to be creative in every single way she could find. Kadınlığım krizde. Kadınlığım krizde. Üret diyor bana ikide birde. Benim betonum var, demirim var, telim var, kuşlarım var, uçamaz, düşlerim var, yetmez, toprağım yok. Üret diyor bana. Emeği değer bilirim ama malzemem tüketiciye endeksli. Son tüketim tarihi ise kapakta. Aç bitir, hemen harca, biriktirme, büyütme, yetiştirme, amacına aykırı kullanma. Beyhude çaba. Kapılar kapanınca kalemim var, kağıdım var. Yazarım. Yazarım denizler aşar, yazarım yollar geçer. Yazarım temizlenir, inşa edilir. Yazarım dikilir, yeniden yeşillenir. Yazarım bilinir, yazarım oynanır, yazarım buluşur. Kadınlığım kurtulur. Kimi kez uyanıyor ve yine güzelleştir diyor bana gelince. Süsle ne varsa açıkta, renklendir ne varsa soluk, düzenle ne varsa dağınık. Oysa bir masa vardır bizden önce, bir yatak, bir ayakkabılık, bir dolap. Boya kalemi yoktur. Şiş, tığ, boncuk, yasak. So thank you very much, and I'm going to unmute.
It's important that it was read and not translated. I decided to publish the poem in the French review, and I didn't want it to be translated because that was Ebru's word. And to translate a poet, you need another poet. And if you do Google translation, even if you choose the best translator, expert, you need a real poet to translate a poem. So that was just the sound of the words that were important to us all, I think. So I think we have, I brought some prize. I don't know how it's organized. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Etienne. So we will continue with a message from Aytaç Ünzal, who is one of Ebru's colleagues, was one of Ebru's colleagues, and who sent a message from prison for this year's ceremony. He is in prison in Silivri High Security Prison since 2017, and he was Ebru's colleague at the People's Law Office and joined her in the hunger strike. So here is a message from him. The 14th of June is our birthday. The 14th of June is the day of the right to a fair trial, not to be judged in a fair manner, but also to judge in a fair manner. Because the people have never accepted being judged by the rulers, The 14th of June is the day of our Ebru. Attorney Ebru Timtik has defended the people's right to judge offenders throughout her life. With her lifetime, profession, and life, she judged those who committed crimes against the people. Ebru used to say, even if a lawyer dies, they will defend the right in their grave. Today, she continues to defend our right to a fair trial and demand justice for the people. You can hear her in the voices of people whose families and dreams were left under the earthquake ruins. Look at the workers' protests all over Anatolia, and you will see her. Our Ebru is our sense of justice. On the 14th of June, the Ebru Timtik Award will be presented to her colleague worldwide. To those struggling for justice, the Palestinian people resisting in Gaza, deserving the biggest award, will salute our Ebru with their rising anger from the rubble. And Nurettin Kaya, who resisted with a death fast against high-security prisons, will greet our Ebru with his 30-kilogram body. Together, we will shout, Attorney Ebru Timtik is immortal. Thank you. Now, before announcing this year's laureate, I would like to explain another dimension of this ceremony related to art. The Ebru Timtik Award artwork intersects human rights and art. The award honors those fighting for fair trial right, necessitating an additional dimension to reflect the multifaceted nature of this struggle. Each year, amazing artists create artwork for this ceremony, dedicated to this award. The steering group plans to open an exhibition to commemorate Ebru's struggle and the dedication of the awardees and the artistic creations inspired by them. So we would like at this stage to give our special thanks to the art consultant, Ishen Onul, for her continued support. Thank you, Ishen. And yes. And this year's artwork is an art piece from Stephanie Vuschitz, and it's called Reactive Courage. It's an animation film that we will watch in a minute. Stephanie is an artistic researcher based in Indonesia. She's focusing on demystifying and decolonizing technology production. She founded the feminist hack lab Ems Baltazar's laboratory in 2009, and she has presented her work at international venues and art festivals. We will first watch her animation film, and then we will welcome Stephanie, who will present her work briefly. Thank you.
Only dead people know the end of the war. He was shot. She was shot. He was killed. They got shot. They killed him. They did not take her to the court. They said he was an addict. He was on their list without a trial. Killed him and his wife. What will happen? they cannot kill us all.
I hereby declare a campaign that this city is at war against drugs.
And because, yeah, the situation is under repression of the military regime. And then I draw weapons, tanks, yeah? But I was ended up being arrested.
We never found her body. Be the change you want to see. Justice.
The situation got too dangerous. He had to leave the country.
Not all of us can afford to leave the country. That fear is governing us. But we must let it go. Nobody came to pick me up when I got released from the prison.
The United Nations Human Rights Council and other governments should denounce this practice and put pressure on the Philippine government to stop red tape.
Defend freedom of speech! It's not terrorism!
It's time. End extrajuridical killings now.
Stephanie.
Hello.
No.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Nice. So we just watched your animation film. Thank you for your amazing work and contribution. And if you like, it would be great if you could, in a few words, explain a bit your work, Reactive Courage, and the inspiration behind it.
I'm very touched that Ebru seemed to have made her own art also with writing and singing, and I would like to read the small text I wrote about the process of making this animation, if it's okay, maybe like 2 minutes. There are numbers, not enough numbers. There's quantitative research, not enough of it, and there's evidence that makes us speak up with more confidence. But to deal with emerging feelings of despair and unsettling questions that shake up our core values is sometimes too much, and we need more than that, more than only numbers. I think art can be a way of processing complex and dark and traumatic content that is otherwise hard to unpack. Having lived in Southeast Asia as an arts-based researcher for 6 months now, I've gone through a lot of stages of grief, and I still digest all the things I heard in interviews and conversations. Some of them pop up in this animation. After countless dark and vibrant and sleepless nights, what gave me new courage was looking at street arts in the morning here in Yogyakarta. And the sentence, "Only the dead know the end of the war," is something I found on the street wall here, written in a different language. The two creatures in the last scene of this animation, with one eye on each side merging into one single face, is also inspired by a simple drawing that someone painted on a street wall here in Indonesia. And like the street artist, it helps me a lot to express myself, because this way the restless nights become more bearable. I feel more safe again and have an easier time finding important allies who validate and enable each other's struggle and encourage each other to struggle further. This way, I also found the people who helped me to make this animation: Asara Panyalai, who did the voices, Wayuji Tanjung Raub, who did the drums, Asemali, who helped me with editing, and Surya Widodo, who helped me with video editing. Thank you so much for having me to create this year's Ebru Timtik Award artwork. It was an extreme big honor.
Thank you, Stephanie. So, finally, this year's Ebru Timtik Award Selection Committee included esteemed lawyers, judges, and human rights defenders from the Philippines and worldwide. We are grateful to Justice Adolfo S. Ascuna, Professor Pacifico A. Agabin, Peter Hannenberg, Stefan Jacobi, and Türkan Baykal for their invaluable time and support in forming this year's selection committee and making a hard decision. At this stage, I would like to call esteemed selection committee member, Professor Agabin, on the stage. Most of you must already know, but Professor Agabin is a professor of constitutional law and the chairman of the Constitutional Law Department of the Philippine Judicial Academy. He received his LLB from the University of the Philippines and his LLM and JSD from Yale Law School. He has held various academic and legal positions, including the one of Dean of the University of the Philippines College of Law and Lyceum of the Philippines University College of Law. He has authored and edited several books on the Philippine legal system and constitutional law and has received numerous honors, including the 1997 National Book Award for Law. Dean Agabin kindly accepted our invitation to announce the award on behalf of the selection committee. Please.
Thank you, and ladies and gentlemen, the jury has deliberated extensively for all of the three nominees have proven themselves to be more than worthy to receive the award. During his entire working life, Mr. Rudy Saladero, is he here among us? I think he's still behind bars. Mr. Rudy Saladero has been very active as a human rights defender. He has not had an easy life. Because of this, the jury acknowledges and would like to mention his name especially. Miss Golda Musni, the other individual nominee, has also shown to be a highly esteemed human rights lawyer. By standing up for the rights of others, especially those who would be deprived of defense, she unfortunately had to make the supreme sacrifice of leaving the country. The jury also has taken that into consideration. Eventually, the majority of the jury agreed on the consideration that the two mentioned lawyers, Mr. Rudy Saladero and Ms. Golda Musni, didn't entirely operate on their own actions. The organization was also a vehicle for all or most of their responsible, reasonable awards, actions. The organization was also nominated, and it seemed reasonable to the majority of the jury to grant the National Union of People's Lawyers the Ebru Timtik Award. So, the Ebru Timtik Award 2024 is given to National Union of People's Lawyers. An organization which has been active in defending and promoting the right to a fair trial in the Philippines. Members of the NUPL succeeded in upholding the fundamental values of human rights as is enshrined in the Philippine Constitution. And UPL is thus awarded for giving meaning and substance at the risk of personal harassment, false accusations, death threats, and even state-mandated liquidations to the Philippine constitutional concept of due process of law. This includes the accused's right to a fair trial, to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation against him, to have a speedy, impartial, and public trial, to meet the witnesses face to face, and to have compulsory process to secure the attendance of witnesses and the production of evidence in his behalf, as well as the right to appeal. These are all enumerated in the Philippine Constitution. The NUPL have rendered legal services, especially to political dissenters, the poor and the oppressed, pro bono, without any hope or expectation of reward. Human rights, it seems, are universal and must be defended when governments tend to ignore them or even deliberately violate them. An organization to provide people with adequate legal aid in such circumstances is a necessity. The jury, therefore, wants to award an UPL for the work they have been doing for decades. The jury also expresses their hope that the international recognition of an UPL's work to aid Philippine citizens will help in difficult circumstances with the help of an UPL and its members to continue their work. So the award goes to NUPL and may we call on the chairman and officers to receive the award.
Can you call all the NUPL members to come on stage? Ebru Timtik Award.
Babalik nyo, ha? Ingatan nyo kasi baka mabasag.
Actually, hindi namin alam talaga to na kahapon lang ata. Ito yung aming acceptance fee. Acceptance fee.
Just in case.
Acceptance speech.
Just in case.
It is immensely humbling for the National Union of People's Lawyers to have been chosen for this award. We sincerely thank Ebru Timtik Award Selection Committee for honoring us. This recognition is not only a singular endorsement of our competence, consistency, and credibility as activists and passionate pro bono volunteer lawyers for the people, but hopefully can also be a shield against the vicious attacks against our ranks. It is most welcome departure from various forms of attacks and the vicious red tagging that we regularly get because we take on cases, clients, and issues which many others cannot or will not take on. We wish to congratulate as well our dear colleagues and co-members Remigio Ming Saladero and Charina Dinkay Musni for being our co-nominees, even as they can be regarded as the generational representation of the NUPL membership. We are going to divide the acceptance fee.
This award belongs not to any one member or a group of members alone, but rightfully to each and every member of NUPL, for they are the NUPL who act, live, breathe, feel, and think as the best lawyers that money cannot buy. As our founding Congress keynote message from a former Chief Justice pointed out 17 years ago, when we closed ranks and formed NUPL, and I quote, "By calling yourselves the people's lawyer, you have made a remarkable choice. You decided not to remain in the sidelines. Where human rights are assaulted, you have chosen to sacrifice the comfort of the fence for the dangers of the battlefield. But only those who chose to fight on the battlefield live beyond irrelevance. But only those who choose to fight on the battlefield live beyond irrelevance." Close quote. We dedicate this award equally, and I would like to call the children of Ben Ramos on stage, the son and daughter of our dear colleague Ben Ramos, who flew all the way from Negros. We dedicate this award equally to the sons and daughters of our fallen comrades-in-law and those who have gone with their boots on and passed on the baton to us to finish the journey. No matter the manner of death, they are all heroes in our hearts. And may I ask those in the audience who are currently our clients to please stand up and be recognized. Current clients, current. And those who have been our former clients. And those who want to be our future clients, whether you like it or not. Ultimately, we share this award to you. Ultimately, it is not us. It is never us. Ultimately, we share this award to our clients, our brave clients who deserve brave lawyers, as well as future clients, as the case will be. It is, after all, the social movement that makes people's lawyering an imperative.
We are extremely moved by the words of the Caravana delegation when they said that the members are honored to stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity with the courageous lawyers, prosecutors, and judges of the Philippines. They reflect the very best of the legal profession and shine as beacons for us all. Indeed, as our founding chairperson, Romeo T. Capulong, who inspired us to push the parameters of lawyering and dreamt of making people's lawyering as a viable, nay legitimate calling, admittedly extrajudicially, he said, "After long years of experience as a people's lawyer, I can honestly say it has been a treasured journey of self-fulfillment and rewarding achievement. I know it will be the same for all others who choose to tread this path," end of quote. Hence, we defy and refuse to be extinct. We will multiply, we will propagate, and we will flourish until our raison d'etre for being the people's lawyers ceases.
Last na po ito, promise. We are keenly aware that even as Romy Capulong gave a clear view that the law, stripped of its usual rhetorical facade, is merely the collective expression of the interests and a sophisticated mechanism of the dominant elite to perpetuate the existing system in any given society, it must serve the people. And that people's lawyers can use the existing law for the benefit and interests of the people on the one hand, and evolve and develop an alternative legal system for the people over time on the other hand. Finally, we shall eternally remember the inspiring words of Ebru Timtik, who had to make their extraordinary sacrifice of giving up her life, fighting for the basic principle of a fair trial. Only those who resist are hopeful. Our hope is great. Our faith is complete. Once again, thank you, and we will not fail you as the poor, oppressed, and exploited in our society and across the world need us to be on their side. And we renew our promise that we have kept. We shall carry on the fight by slaying the dragons of injustice, even though the heavens fall. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay po tayong lahat at padayon. Lumalaban! Makabayan! Lumalaban! Makabayan! Thank you.
Thank you to our amazing colleagues of the NUPL with a well-deserved award. Before we welcome Professor Sarah Chandler for closing remarks, it's coming to an end. All right. All right. So before closing the closing remarks, I would like to thank one more time Jeren Wissal, our colleague who couldn't make it today. She's the great, crazy organizer behind, one of them behind this celebration today, and yes, we wish she was here with us.
Thank you, and thank you all. My name is Sarah Chandler, and I'm the Secretary of the Human Rights Commission of the Federation of European Bar Associations, which represents over 1 million lawyers in the Council of Europe states. And it's my honor to do the thank yous to everybody and close today. And I thank all the speakers. You know, over 30 have contributed to this inspirational event. And thank you especially to our hosts, the Integrated Bar and the NUPL. Thank you, yes, clap, clap. And to the members of the Caravana Filipina for your work with the inspirational lawyers and the victims and survivors who have contributed to the Caravana's testimonials and inspirational work, and to the steering group, especially Cheren and Aisha. And on behalf of the steering group, at the end of the day, we've all been brought together by the inspiration of so many people. And it's about commitment, it's about determination, it's about hope and trust, as we have heard. And the international legal community are proud to be here alongside all of you. And we have listened, we have discussed, and we've considered what we must do. We've been inspired by all of your efforts, inspired by Ebru Timtik's courage and sacrifice, and your courage inspires us undoubtedly. 2 days ago was Independence Day, and as a visitor, yesterday I went to Fort Santiago, and I learnt about someone that you all know very well, but the international community does not know well, Dr. José Rizal. He was a poet, he was a scientist and a doctor, a writer, he was an inspirational philosopher, and he was an advocate of social justice for the people in over 300 years of Spanish colonial rule, and a hero of independence. His inspirational words, which I know all of our Filipino colleagues know, I'm sure, by heart, but for us in the international community, he said, "There are no tyrants if there are no slaves. There are no tyrants if there are no slaves." And I adapt some words of his. On this battlefield, we have no better weapon than our intelligence, and no other force but our hearts. Today, we've learned so much from all of you with our intelligence and have felt so much with our hearts. We must take our feelings and our intelligence and build solidarity. This is the mission of the international community. We will stand with you. I conclude. The world is watching. That is our message. The world is watching the state. The world is watching, and all the strength of international organizations must stand alongside you. We are with you and will be with you shoulder to shoulder with you in this struggle for an end to impunity, an end to the violation of human rights, and for justice of the people, the people's justice, and for justice itself. Thank you.
This is the end. Thank you, everyone.